Hello everyone. In yesterday's class, discussed about friction. What is friction? How many types of friction is there, and what are they? We already discussed, right? So, what is friction? A resistive force which opposes the motion of one body over the other body, or surface of the one body over the surface of other body, right? So how many types of friction is there? Four types: static friction, sliding friction, and rolling friction. We already discussed what is static friction, what is sliding, and what is rolling. In this class, uh, we'll discuss about fluid friction, as well as how the friction is necessary in our daily life, and how to reduce and how to increase the friction. Okay, so friction is, we cannot walk or run without friction, right? Yes or no? So we already discussed, for each and every surface there is interlockings, like ups and downs are there. So if the ups and downs of one object matches or locks with the ups and downs with the other object, then the particular object stays on the other surface, right? So if friction is not present, even vehicles will not exist, right? Cars, buses, bicycles, and everything will not exist. Carpenters will not be able to smoothen surfaces. You will not able to hold any appliances such as like hammer, soap, brush, each and every object you are holding because of only friction. Okay, so from all these activities we perform, friction is very important, right? Without friction we cannot do anything. Okay, on the other hand, friction is undesirable too. Yes or no? So in just we discussed some examples, right? In that examples we need friction, or we discussed friction is very important. But some cases friction is not important, we need to avoid friction. Okay, so on the other hand, friction is undesirable too. In in the machinery, especially in the machinery, you need to apply oil or grease to your bicycle parts in order to move smooth. Right? You already experienced this. You if the bicycle is not moving properly, you have to apply grease or oil so that it will move very easily. Right? So friction is important in some cases. Okay, like to do perform some activities, it is important. And even with the friction only we can write by using, we can write with the pen or pencil by using friction only. Okay, so but in some cases, like in case of machinery, friction is not required. Okay, so next, friction produces heat. Whether the friction produces heat or not, let us see. Heat. So rub your both hands. Okay, if you rub your hands, you will get a heat. Okay, so try to do this. Okay, so strike a matchbox against the surface of a matchbox. So in the both the cases, what happens here, we observe, because of the friction, temperature of the surfaces increases, right? Yes or no? So try to rub your both hands, you can see temperature increases. Yes or no? So matchsticks catches fire because of the increased temperature, okay, by the friction. Thus we can conclude that friction produces heat. Yes or no? First example, rubbing hands. From these activities we can conclude friction produces heat. Okay, rubbing hands. Next, striking striking a matchstick surface of matchbox. Okay, so from these two activities we can conclude that friction produces heat, right? Yes or no? So friction is necessary in some cases and it is not necessary in some cases. Okay, so to perform each and everyday activities for us we need friction. So but in case of machinery, friction is not important, and also friction produces heat. We can conclude from these two activities. Next, how to reduce friction. Okay, reduce. Okay, so you can observe different patterns and threading on the on your backside of shoe, as well as for some, I mean for tires of a vehicles, right? You can see different patterns. Why these patterns are printed on the shoe as well as these tire backs tires? Okay, to reduce the friction. Okay, to reduce the friction. So you know you play games very well, right? While playing carom board, try to play without sprinkling powder and as well as by sprinkling powder, in which case you can able to do your work, or you can play very well. In the case of when you sprinkle powder, okay, that if you sprinkle powder, what happens? Friction is increases or decreases? Smoothness, smooth surfaces, what happens? Friction will less friction. To decrease the friction, you are sprinkling powder on the carom board. But while walking, can you walk on the muddy road or slippery surfaces? No, you cannot, because friction is very very less there. If the friction is very less, then there is a possibility that you may fall down by slipping. Okay, so some cases we need to increase the friction, and some cases you need to reduce the friction. Okay, so in the cases we want to reduce friction in order to increase the efficiency, right? Yes or no? Okay, so to play caroms very well, here what you are doing here, you are decreasing the friction, means you are making surfaces very smooth. Okay, so here you are increasing your efficiency, right? To increase your efficiency, what you are doing, you are reducing friction. Okay, so painters also, what they'll do, while before painting they rub the paper with the, I mean they rub the surfaces with some instrument, so that the surface will become smooth, so that they can paint easily. Okay, so when oil or grease or any other lubricants are applied between the moving parts, so we already said for machinery friction is not important, right? Okay, so what happens while playing carom, what you are doing? Increasing friction or decreasing? You are reducing friction. Okay, reducing friction to increase the efficiency. Okay, so in machineries we do not require a friction, we already discussed. So we use lubricants to reduce the friction, right? So what are lubricants? Lubricants, the substance which reduce friction are called lubricants. like oil or grease. These are said to be lubricants because you are reducing friction by applying the oil or grease, right? Yes or no? In the case of machinery. So, uh, to reduce the friction, what you are using, like oil, grease, these are said to be lubricants. Okay, so applied these lubricants or oil, grease are applied between the moving parts of a machine. A thin layer is formed between the moving part surfaces, so hence they do not directly rub against each other, so the interlocking of irregularities is avoided to great extent by the application of lubricants, hence the movement becomes smoother. Suppose one, if the wheel is like this. Okay, so one more, you can see missionaries, big missionaries in some movies, and if you go to factories you can find. Okay, so what happens, these will run like this, these two wheels will run like this, these interlockings will there. So if they directly interact, what happens, the due to this interaction, due to the friction present on these two wheels, the heat produces we already discussed, but we need to reduce this friction to run, and if the friction is present, the running or the operating of the machine will become problem. So what we need to do, we have to apply lubricant between these two surfaces so that these will move properly, and we can do our work very smoothly. So lubricants are used to reduce the friction in case of especially machinery. Okay, yes or no? So next, what is fluid friction? So what are said to be fluids? In science, both air and water are said to be fluids. Okay, so the friction exerted by these fluids is called as a fluid friction or a drag. Okay, so what are fluids, in science common language? What we can say that fluids are liquids and gases. Gases are said to be fluids in science language. Okay, yes or no? In science, the common name for both the liquid and gases are fluids. So the friction exerted by these liquid and gases are called what? Fluid friction, or also called as drag. Okay, so the friction, so the frictional force exerted by fluids is called, is also called drag. Okay, so the frictional force exerted by these fluids, what are fluids, these gases and liquids, is also known as drag. Okay, so we can say that fluids exert force by friction on an object in motion through them. So if any object is moving through the air or through the water, that water exert friction on these objects, okay, while moving through them. So what happens here, if you observe the shape of aeroplane as well as birds, okay, aeroplane as well as birds, they appear to be in a same shape. So just to imagine and think, let us consider this is flight. You can see birds and even planes, aeroplanes, are given special shapes so that they can overcome this fluid friction and they move very easily. Okay, yes or no? So where these, let us think, the flight is made in this manner, right? If we, why don't they made flight also in the shape of bus and all? So they got idea by the nature, like birds. Okay, from the birds they thought, and to overcome this fluid friction they made a flights in this in this shape of birds. Okay, so What are the factors that affect the fluid friction? Okay, factors influencing fluid friction. So, frictional force on an object is a fluid depends on its speed with respect to fluid. Okay, with how much speed it is moving in the fluid with respect to that fluid. Okay, so on the shape of object and on the nature of the fluid also. So what are the factors affect here? Speed of an object, and also shape of an object, shape, and also nature of a fluid. Okay, so factors influencing the fluid friction, what are the three factors? Speed of an object, shape of an object, and nature of the fluid through which it is moving. Okay na? These are the three factors which influence the fluid friction. Okay, so observe birds and aeroplanes. Just now I said, when objects move through the fluids, they have to overcome the fluid friction. Yes or no? So fluid friction acting on them, so efforts are made to minimize the friction. So birds, fishes have to move about in the fluids all the time, right? So their bodies must have evolved to shapes which would make them not to lose much energy in overcoming the friction. Okay na? So these uh, shape of the birds and fishes are made such that they should not lose much energy while overcoming this fluid friction. So this is about the friction. Okay, so let us think some examples where this friction is not present and all. So everyone, please visit school app for the classes daily and do the homework. You have to do must and should, and you have to submit your homework. Okay, so thank you.